Hey folks, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm back. I am back, and this is what a night. Someone tell me, someone just posted a comment. They said, why is mainstream media so mad?
Hey folks,
good question.
welcome, welcome,
why
welcome.
is mainstream media so angry that peace could finally be on the verge of breaking out on the Korean Peninsula? Let me give you the lowdown, right? So the meeting happened. We have a signed agreement between Trump and Kim Jong-un, a 4-point agreement they agreed on. Number one, USA is establishing diplomatic relations between the USA and North Korea. Diplomatic relations. The USA is acknowledging that the government in the northern part of the Korean Peninsula, they're acknowledging them, recognizing them. It sounds to me like there's going to be an embassy opening up, right? There's going to be relations, healthy relations between two countries. That's huge. We've never had that with North Korea, let me tell you that much. Second of all, the second part of the agreement is that there's going to be a stable, lasting peace framework on the peninsula. Number three, the third part is a commitment to denuclearization based on the agreement that North and South Korea already reached. And number four, the dead bodies of American GIs, POW, MIAs in North Korea are going to be sent back to the United States. 4-point agreement between the two countries. This is huge. This is really, really huge. And someone just commented, yeah, someone explained to me, why is mainstream media so angry that peace might be breaking out? Explain that to me. Explain that to me, folks. But it seems to be the case. Mainstream media does not want there to be peace on the Korean Peninsula. I do not get it. It is 3 in the morning. I am at my office. I am getting on RT and trying to report this in an objective way, which mainstream media is absolutely not doing. But my goodness, folks, think about what the Koreans have been through. I mean, 4 to 5 million people dead during the Korean War. The arduous March period, where you had, the fact that North Korea they couldn't buy oil to make their agricultural system work. So because of that, there was a problem. There was a food crisis, and they were on the brink. That was in the 90s. Furthermore, you can think about all that's gone on that the Korean people have been through. This is something historic, right? The USA is acknowledging that the DPRK has the right to exist. Diplomatic relations being established. I mean, this is something else. Somebody's telling me this is horrible news. This is not horrible news. This is what North Korea has been asking for decades. They've been wanting to not be barricaded and surrounded and sanctioned. They've wanted to be treated like a real country and respected by the international community. Russia supports this. China supports this. This is big. I mean, for years there have been protests all over the world by anti-imperialists demanding sign the treaty. Sign the treaty, peace treaty with North Korea. It looks like we have a step toward that. We have an official declaration of relations. This is huge. This is huge. This is a big, dramatic move. I mean, this is the USA and the DPRK moving closer. And I mean, the first point is official relations, right? North Korea is going to get the same respect that any other country gets. The USA is not going to pretend that the government in the South represents all Koreans. That's how been U.S. policy until now. They've been saying that the government in the South, the government, that came in with the Jeju Island massacre, the government of Syngman Rhee, the government of Park Chung-hee, that government is all of the Korean Peninsula, right? Just like they used to do with Taiwan. Remember that? Until Nixon went to China, the USA said that this tiny island, the government on Taiwan, was the entire government of China. That all of China's millions and millions and I think 1 billion people were represented by this government on Taiwan. But then Nixon went to China. He recognized the People's Republic of China. Right? Well, now we have Trump recognizing the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, not pretending that the regime in the South represents all of the Korean people. This is a breakthrough. This is dramatic. This is something I have not seen. So much history to talk about. So much going on here. And it's interesting because you can't separate. You cannot separate world events from each other, right? Because world events are intertwined. They're connected. And at the same time, we're finding out that Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe, a country that has very, very close ties with North Korea, right? In fact, Robert Mugabe, the leader of Zimbabwe's revolution, for a long time, his personal bodyguards were actually North Koreans. That country is about to have their own steel industry. China has worked with the government of Zimbabwe, and they are going to help the government of Zimbabwe set up a steel industry, steel manufacturing in an African country. An African country, Zimbabwe, is going to start making its own steel, and China is going to work with them to do that. And Zimbabwe and North Korea have for a long time been very, very close. Those are two countries, you know, when Zimbabwe was Rhodesia, which was, you know, a white settler colonial regime led by Ian Smith, you know, and the people of Zimbabwe were fighting for their independence. One of the countries that came to their aid was North Korea, and they aided the African people in fighting against the British Empire and fighting against Rhodesia and establishing Zimbabwe. They provided them with military assistance. Well, you know, Zimbabwe is moving ahead now too. They're about to set up and about to have their own steel industry. When I was in Russia in October at the World Festival of Youth and Students, just this amazing gathering that goes on every 4 years, and I was there and I met with some of these young people from Zimbabwe, and they were telling me about how, you know, the world's biggest waterfall, the Victoria Falls, is in Zimbabwe. But until now, you know, this is one of the natural wonders of the world. The biggest waterfall in the world is in Zimbabwe. But until now, no one's really been able to visit it. I mean, there's been kind of a path there and all that, but China has worked with the government of Zimbabwe, and they actually built a hotel. So tourists from all over the world can now go to Zimbabwe and see the Victoria Falls, one of the most beautiful natural wonders, the biggest waterfall in the entire world, right? This is huge. People underestimate the importance of what China is doing in the world right now. What China is doing with One Belt, One Road, the new Silk Road, I mean, this is big, and it coincides, it's alongside what Russia is doing with the Eurasian Economic Union. There is an alternative on the global economy. The rule of Wall Street in London, who basically the way they rule the world is, oh, you know, we're going to keep the rest of the world poor so that we have a monopoly, so everyone has to trade with us. It's going to be an oil-based economy. Rockefeller and Carnegie and DuPont and Rothschild and Morgan are going to rule the world. The world's going to stay poor and underdeveloped so Wall Street and London bankers can stay rich, holding back human progress, keeping countries in poverty. That world order, that old world order of Wall Street and London is under threat. It is changing. And, you know, we've got this dramatic new alternative coming out of Russia and China, coming out of countries like Zimbabwe, Venezuela, the Latin American alternative, the BRICS Forum. This is exciting. We are not living in the old world. This is a new world that's emerging, and it's win-win cooperation. It is an alternative model in global trade. Start talking to me, folks. This is an exciting time that we are living in. This is unprecedented. You know, I have had the luxury. You know, I was in Iran. I was in Iran like 3 or 4 years ago, and I remember I was in the city of Bandar Abbas, which is in southern Iran. And I was there, and I remember I saw, you know, just a skyline full of Chinese signs, right? The USA has sanctions on Iran. At that point, this is before the nuclear deal even went down, so there were especially big sanctions on Iran. And at that point, you know, Iran, you know, it didn't matter because they're trading with China. I saw all this construction going on in China, you know, going on in Iran with Chinese corporations. We're living in an exciting time. The world economy is changing. Think about the Korean people and what they have been through over the last 60 years, well over 60 years, right? I mean, you know, North and South Korea, the Korean people are one people. They are one people, one language. These are the people who invented the printing press. They invented the printing press. You know, a lot of people will tell you that the printing press was invented by, who's that guy in Europe? Johannes Gutenberg. He did not invent the printing press. The printing press was already being used on the Korean peninsula. At the United Nations, they actually have it on display. One of the first printing presses from ancient Korea. They have it in a case in the UN headquarters. You can see it. The Korean people were printing. Before the Chinese were, before anybody in Europe had even thought about printing, they had printing presses on the Korean peninsula. Right? The Korean people are a people with a proud heritage. just a proud heritage, and they have been subject to so much humiliation and degradation. I mean, look at Hollywood, right? I mean, the films that they have made, right? I mean, they make a film, you know, what is that movie, The Interview? They're mocking the leader of Korea, portraying his assassination, portraying Korean women as if they're just sex objects. You know, I mean, you know, what's that awful movie the South Park guys made? You know, the abuse that the Korean people have been subject to. You know, you read in American press, they just say things about North Korea that have no factual accuracy. They say that in North Korea, women are not allowed to ride bicycles. That's complete and utter nonsense, right? Not only do North Korean women ride bicycles, get online, you can see all kinds of videos of people in Pyongyang and people in different parts of the country watching women riding bicycles. But not only that, in North Korea, you have women who have won Olympic gold medals in boxing, in sharpshooting, and all kinds of sports that are considered masculine. So this idea that women in North Korea can't ride bicycles, or what's another one you hear? Oh, North Korea believes in unicorns. No, if you read the fine print of those articles, they did some archaeological digging in North Korea. They came across an ancient site that the inscription on it said it was a tomb of a unicorn, right? That was what it was called. That doesn't mean that people in North Korea believe in unicorns. So much slander. Kim Jong-un does not say he invented the hamburger. You know, there's just so much of this slander. So much of this stuff that gets put out by South Korean military intelligence gets repeated in American media as if it's just 100% true. Meanwhile, nobody talks about the fact that they have established universal literacy in North Korea. No one gives them credit for that they wiped out illiteracy. One of the first things they did, they brought teachers, literacy experts in from the Soviet Union, and they set up an educational system. Even after the country had been demolished during the Korean War, they wiped out illiteracy. Another thing, H. Bruce Franklin, brilliant professor, University of Chicago, read his writings. He talks about how the fact that there is not homelessness in North Korea. As much as they've had, the food shortages caused by the barricades and they've had their difficulties, you don't find homelessness. They have made sure that every single person has a roof over their head. So North Korea has done quite a few big things. And let's not forget that in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, their economy was actually doing quite well. The problems with their economy, when people talk about the food crisis and all that, came in the 1990s when the Soviet Union collapsed. Why? Because if you look at the map of the Korean Peninsula, they're the northern part. They're where all the mountains are. They don't have very much arable land. The arable land, the farmland of Korea, is in the south. And they're barricaded, and so they had an arrangement with the Soviet Union. They gave the Soviet Union coal. The Soviet Union gave them oil, and with that oil, they would run the tractors to run their food system, which is very, very efficient. You've got food growing up on the sides of mountains. You got high rises with food. I mean, their food system is very, very complex. A lot has been written about it. The World Food Organization in the 1980s studied their food system and said it was very, very elaborate. And the fact that they're a mountainous country, but yet they've arranged to have an agricultural system. But then, in the 1990s, when the Soviet Union collapsed and the petrodollar, right? I was talking about those oil bankers before, right? The petrodollar, where the only way you could buy petroleum was with U.S. dollars. When that happened, the Korean people, all of a sudden, they didn't have petroleum, they didn't have gasoline to run those tractors, they needed oil to run their food system, and suddenly they had a big problem, and you had the food crisis, what they call the arduous March period. And then, during the arduous march in 1994, at that point, they have an agreement with Bill Clinton, with Madeleine Albright goes over there. She meets with Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il, and she says she's so impressed. He seemed like a smart man. I mean, it didn't occur to her that the leader of a country of 25 million people might be intelligent. She was just blown away by this. Madeleine Albright's like, wow, Kim Jong-il is a nice guy. He's a smart man. He's educated. Wow. I mean, who'd have thought? I mean, the arrogance of these leaders. They come up with the joint agreement. The agreement is that North Korea will not withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in exchange for the USA giving them heating oil, giving them petroleum to run their food system, giving them food assistance, in exchange for them not developing nuclear weapons. And then Clinton goes to the U.S. Congress to fund the deal he made with North Korea, and the U.S. Congress won't fund the deal. They say, oh, no, we're not going to fund the deal. So North Korea waits, and they wait, and they keep saying, when are we going to get this food you promised us? When are we going to get this assistance? And then they wait, almost a decade they wait, and then George W. Bush comes out and gives the Axis of Evil speech. And remember that Axis of Evil speech? You want to talk about a crazy speech. The only people who could have believed that Axis of Evil speech were people who knew nothing about world politics, right? So 9/11, which he gave the Axis of Evil speech afterwards, Officially that was done by Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda are Saudis. That's Wahhabism, Saudi Arabia, right? So in the Axis of Evil speech that Bush gives to the world to tell us who we're supposed to hate in the aftermath of 9/11, who does he blame as the Axis of Evil? What countries does he name? He names Iran. Iran are not Wahhabis like bin Laden. They're Shiite. They're Shia Muslims, right? They Al-Qaeda types, bin Laden, the Saudis, they call them Shia apostates. They want to overthrow the Iranian government. They have nothing to do with 9/11, so that's wrong. They name Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein, that's a secular government. That's Ba'athist Arab socialism. Secular government, women holding public office, Sunni and Shia together, Iraqi, Iraqi national identity, nothing to do with Al-Qaeda and bin Laden. And then they name North Korea. On the other side of the world, not a Muslim country, nothing to do with Iran, Iraq, or the Wahhabi extremists. Bush just gives this speech, and meanwhile, who's he covering up for? He's covering up for Saudi Arabia. We now have the 28 pages of the 9/11 Commission report showing an extensive amount of connections between the Saudi government, which the USA coddles, which the USA sells weapons to and buys their oil. We saw Donald Trump, he bashed them on the campaign trail, but then he danced around with the Saudi king, with Rex Tillerson and all of that. The Saudi government had ties with the 9/11 attacks and with the hijackers, and they kept those ties hidden for over 15 years. Meanwhile, the Axis of Evil speech, they tried to connect 9/11 to 3 countries that had nothing to do with it, including North Korea. So after the Axis of Evil speech comes down, at that point, North Korea says, okay, we've had this joint agreement since 1994 not to develop nuclear weapons. We've waited this long, and at that point, they withdrew from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and got themselves nuclear weapons. And we've had this nuclear crisis ever since, but it looks to me like now we have an agreement, commitment to denuclearization, recognition. This is a step forward. So who do we got talking to me here? We got Rory Lennon, the commission report that defies science. Oh, you're into the 9/11 questions. We've all got questions about 9/11. I've got questions about it too. What I tell people is that I don't know, though. I'm very clear about that. There's a lot of things in the official account of 9/11 that don't exactly make sense, but I stop there. I don't know what happened. I'm not like the mainstream media. The mainstream media tells us they know exactly what happened. I don't know what happened. A lot of things I have questions about, but I don't know what happened. A lot of anyone who tells you they know what happened on 9/11 is lying to you. I'll tell you that much, because there's some things in the official story that don't add up, but beyond the official story, we don't know what happened. Clearly two buildings fell down. In addition, there was Building 7. Clearly, there's a big chunk of the Pentagon that's gone. There's some planes that are missing. But beyond that, a lot of questions in the official 9/11 report of story. We don't know what exactly happened. But I stop there, right? I stop there because I don't know what happened. I know that a lot of things don't make sense in the official report. I'll tell you that much. Now, Rory Lennon, you're an engineer. Very good. I'm glad you're an engineer. It's funny. I was giving a speech at the Left Forum in New York City 2 or 3 years ago, and they listed my organizational affiliation, I kid you not, as Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. I have never been an architect, I've never been an engineer, and I've never been part of the 9/11 Truth movement. So I was insulted. I tweeted it out. I was like, oh, they've granted me an engineering or an architecture degree. This is just, it was silliness. I don't know why they did that. That was very, very strange. The Left Forum is a strange place. I haven't been in the last few years, but, maybe I'll be back there and give a talk sometime. Now, Natalie Revolts, she's saying DPRK is not Libya. Well, that's what the DPRK said. They made that point. After the fall of the Libyan government, they put out a document and they said, look, Iraq did not have nuclear weapons. Libya gave up their nuclear proliferation program. We have nuclear weapons, and our country hasn't been blown to bits and destroyed. They had a very good point. Look at Libya today, all right? So, there's some people, they don't like Gaddafi. They think Gaddafi is not a good guy. I think that what Gaddafi did in terms of raising the life expectancy in Libya, in terms of having the highest life expectancy on the African continent, providing healthcare and education, bringing irrigation to the desert, what he did for that African country was huge, in terms of development. I think that's admirable. You can criticize other things, people talk about human rights, but in terms of what Gaddafi did for the Libyan people in terms of making their lives better, a strong argument can be made in his defense. Regardless, maybe you don't accept that, whatever. Well, look at Libya today, right? The country has been blown to bits. They've got 2 governments that don't like each other, at each other's throats. You've got literal slavery going on. They've got slave markets, in Africa, on the African continent, slavery in Libya. Furthermore, things have gotten so bad in Libya, people are piling onto rafts, getting in the Mediterranean and drowning in mass trying to get out of Libya. So if you think U.S. regime change in Libya, if you think that, that State Department, go and save them and provide them with freedom works out, look at Libya today. That is a model of what, the global free market neoliberal capitalist system has to offer, right? They're selling their oil on the international markets. They're working with the Wall Street oil corporations. Their state-run oil company has been broken up. The country's a colony now of Wall Street and London. What Gaddafi built, the Islamic socialist government, has been destroyed. And if you think that that has made anyone in Libya's life better, I don't know what delusion you're living under. The so-called Libyan revolution that was, fighters that were funded by the United States to go in there and tear things up. ISIS is in Libya now. The ISIS terrorists are there. Al-Qaeda is there. Whatever that regime change operation in Libya did, it made life far, far worse. Same for Iraq. And I don't know how people keep falling for this. Every time there's a war, it's like, there's some guy and there's like, oh, he's a Hitler, he's a dictator. Oh my God, we got to rescue these people. Yes, we don't want to be the policeman of the world, but we have no choice. We have to go in and free those innocent people. And every time that happens, the life for people gets worse. Every time, right? This regime change stuff, it's not good for the people of the United States. It's not good for the people of the respective countries. It's not good for anybody. It's good for Wall Street and London, right? They beat down an independent country that's trying to develop. Oh, who else is talking to me here? Name, no display, no thanks. What do you think of the theory proposed by James Corbett that Trump is an agent trying to bolster the rise of China? I asked you on Facebook but got locked. Well, I got to tell you, I think that's pretty outrageous. The idea that Trump would be working for China or any other country. Trump is working for himself. He has certain factions that he's aligned with. He's aligned with the Likud party in Israel. He's aligned with the anti-Cuba folks in Miami. The fracking companies really like Trump, and they're in kind of a turf war with big oil. I think the Pentagon has kind of had a long-standing disagreement with the CIA about foreign policy. So but do I think that Trump is working for some foreign government? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No. And that's, come on now. Come on, seriously. It's bad enough we got all over mainstream media people trying to convince us Trump's working for Russia, but now we got people trying to say Trump's working for China. Trump is working for Donald Trump. That's who Donald Trump is working for, and he's got a base of people he's trying to please. But, come on. Ask me another question. Nukes will be given to China behind the scenes. Well, China has had nuclear weapons for a long time. There's actually a clip of film, after a performance of this musical, all right, I guess it was like kind of a song and dance performance they had in China called The East is Red. Right after that, Mao walked out onto the stage and he announced that China had exploded its first atomic bomb. And the crowd just went crazy. There was just tears of joy because that meant security. That meant the United States wouldn't be able to threaten them with nuclear destruction. There's a clip, an actual clip of that film of Mao announcing that China had exploded its first atomic weapon and how they considered that to be a great moment of pride in China's history. Fascinating account. But China's been a nuclear power for a long time. During the Korean War, the United States threatened to drop atomic bombs on China and North Korea. That's not, people don't remember that, but actually it was Douglas MacArthur, who was a general in the U.S. Army, and he threatened to drop the atomic bomb on North Korea and on China, and he did that without the permission of President Eisenhower. He did that without the permission of President Truman. It was Truman who was the president, and he was threatening to nuke people without the president's permission. He famously got fired. It's a very famous incident that happened during the Korean War. But yes, the USA was threatening to nuke both of those countries. And let's not forget that North Korea wouldn't exist today if it weren't for China. During the Korean War, as that war was happening, China sent a lot of soldiers into North Korea. In fact, Mao Zedong, the leader of the Chinese Revolution, it was his son, Mao Anyang, actually died during the Korean War. He died, as a fighter in the Korean War. And I've mentioned it many times before. I think it's a fascinating fact that, North Korea is the only country in world history to have ever taken captive taken prisoner a U.S. Army general. There was a U.S. Army general that was taken prisoner during the Korean War. Fascinating. I mean, these Koreans have been fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting. I mean, they have been up against it for 60 years, not surrendering. And by the way, that's what the whole thing with, you know, the fact that Kim Jong-un is the son of Kim Jong-il, who's the son of Kim Il-sung, that's what that's about, by the way. It's about making the point that they're not surrendering, things haven't changed, they're continuing to go. That's what that's about. That's what that's about. It's making sending a message. They're saying that Kim Il-sung, who was like their George Washington, his name means become the sun. It's not actually the name he was born with. Kim becomes the sun. It was kind of like Billy the Kid, or, you know, the Sundance Kid, or it was like an outlaw name. He was a hero. He was up in the mountains fighting against the Japanese occupiers, kind of a Robin Hood. This is the Korean Robin Hood, the Korean George Washington. That's who Kim Il-sung was. He was fighting the Japanese occupiers. He was an outlaw. He was a rebel. You know, he was kind of, you know, he's kind of like, you know, I mean, you know, in the Irish tradition, you know, they talk about the outlaw rapparees, you know, the freedom fighters in the Irish mountains. You know, I mean, that's who Kim Il-sung was. He was fighting the Japanese occupiers. Just a beloved figure. And so by making his son and then his grandson leader of the country, they're sending a message to the rest of the world that they remain committed to the principles that Kim Il-sung established the country on. So who else is talking at me here? Bob, any guarantee the USA will stop drills near North Korea? Good question. Now, we saw, you know, the second point of this agreement, not officially confirmed yet, but the second point that we're seeing now is a stable regime, a stable, peaceful situation on the Korean Peninsula. I would assume that that means, you know, that the USA will stop rehearsing the all-out destruction of North Korea with nuclear weapons, right? We would assume that. However, you know, we don't know. We don't know at this point, right? A lot of questions, so it's not exactly clear. So a lot of questions going on here. I mean, what a night this has been. What a night this has been. Did you think this was possible? Did you think it was possible? Seriously, did you think that the USA would recognize North Korea? I mean, this is something special. I'm very tired, folks. It's almost 4 in the morning. I'm working hard. You know, this is an exciting night. I am so honored to be reporting on this. I'm disgusted by mainstream media. You know, mainstream media, it's like, they're like demented. Whenever, you know, when Trump was bombing Syria, they were joyous, right? I mean, there was danger. We could have gone to war with Russia. We were on the brink of World War III, and they're like, wow, look at those missiles. It's so beautiful. Oh, wow. They were so excited that we were on the brink of World War III, and Trump is sending those missiles, and oh, they were so happy. Now, we're actually establishing peace on the Korean Peninsula, and mainstream media is furious. They're furious. Turn on CNN. I was watching CNN. I couldn't believe it. My head was going to explode. I mean, these people were upset that there might actually be peace on the Korean Peninsula. It was unbelievable. They get mad and outraged about peace, and they get joyous and celebratory about war. We've got crazy, crazy psychopaths running mainstream American media. These CNN people are crazy. They're happy about war and angry about peace. What is wrong with them? I mean, you know, they have a meeting, and what was their grievance? I still can't get over this. I kept hearing them. Their grievance was, you know, Chris Cuomo, CNN, they're upset that the American flag and the flag of the DPRK of North Korea were equal. Equal. Why wouldn't they be equal? It's a meeting between the two countries. What is it? What did they want Trump to do? Did they want him to make you know, the North Korean flag into the you know, the what was it supposed to be, the dirt map or something? They were all supposed to take turns, you know, walking on it as they walked in. It was the doormat or something. Come on. I mean, seriously, what is wrong with American media? They're upset. They're like, oh my goodness. And the other thing they're upset about, oh, the North Korean media is here. They're filming this meeting. So what? American media is there. Media from all over the world is there. South Korean media is there. I mean, it's like they are mad about peace, but yet when Trump was sending cruise missiles to Syria and threatening World War III and putting us on the brink of a war with Russia and attacking the Syrian government, they were happy about it. I can't understand this. This, you know, it's funny. They always, and I've heard this dig throughout the night too. They talk about North Korea. They say, well, we don't have government media in the United States. You know, we have independent media. Well, CNN certainly is not independent media. Anyone who's happy when they're bombing Syria and mad when we're signing a possible peace agreement with North Korea, that's not independent media. They're speaking for the war hawk, the war lobby, Oh my goodness. Oh, what else is going on? CNN exposed. Panic and fear are better for ratings than peace and reconciliation. You got that right, Natalie. That is so true. You know, the media in the USA. What is it? Do you remember the show Family Matters? That was a TV show in the 1990s. And on the show Family Matters, they used to, you know, the theme song, it said, "It's a rare condition this day and age to see any good news on a newspaper page." You know, people laugh about American media because it's, you know, it's so sensational. You know, they always want you to think everything's on the brink, everything's, you know, stabbings and killings and war and you should be afraid and all that. But, you know, it's been really weird. Lately in American media, I got nervous because I saw a number of articles, a number of news reports saying everything's okay, everything's okay. It was really weird. There was a front page, you know, the Wall Street Journal Weekend Review, the front page article was saying, you know, things aren't as bad as you think they are. That's not a good sign. When American media has suddenly gone from there trying to scare the crap out of you and you should be terrified, all of a sudden telling you everything's going to be okay. It's like the creepiest thing. To hear from American media, everything's just fine. It'll be nice. That's really scary. When American media is telling you everything's okay, that's a good hint that things are not okay. Oh my goodness. What is it with this world we're living in? Let's see who else is talking at me. They can't win a war. I don't know. I mean, I think if we ever have a nuclear war, nobody will win. I'll guarantee you that. I mean, with a nuclear war, nobody wins. I can guarantee you that. I keep seeing that doc that they signed is too vague and doesn't mean anything. Well, I mean, that's a good point. That's a good point, but it's the beginning, right? Supposedly, you know, we heard that Trump said apparently that he is going to invite Kim Jong-un to the White House. That's the latest thing we did here, right? They called out and they said that's possible. So this is just the beginning, right? They haven't worked out the specifics of that peace regimen on the Korean Peninsula of denuclearization. Very vague, but you know, and that's going to be a big deal to those families. You know, there's a lot of families who, you know, their relative died in the Korean War. And point number 4 in the agreement was, you know, North Korea will send those bodies back. So that'll be good for those families that lost a relative in that awful, awful war on the Korean Peninsula. You know, that'll be good for those families. And my heart goes out to them. You know, I obviously opposed U.S. involvement in the Korean War. I wasn't alive yet, but I think we shouldn't have done that. But regardless, my heart goes out to those family members who lost their relatives in that conflict. I mean, you know, and you know, it's very funny. You know, there was an old when I was a political activist, when I was getting involved in left-wing groups, there was an older woman who was kind of a mentor to me, I guess you could say. She was in her 80s. She's deceased now. But she had been in the Communist Party when she was in the 1930s. She was born in 1928. There's a picture of her with a little red beret doing this fist salute. And I remember when I met with her, and this was, you know, 10 or 12 years ago when I met with her, we used to get together. This was when I was living in Cleveland. I remember she told me about when she was a college student, how she had actually participated in one of the only protests against the Korean War, not against the Vietnam War. Loads of protests against the Vietnam War. This was a protest against the Korean War in the United States, right? And she had been there, and she was a nursing student, and somebody whispered to her, you know, people are going to be gathering in Times Square. And so, you know, people gathered in Times Square, and they were just wearing suits and ties. And it was the Young Communist League that did it, which at that point was an illegal organization. You know, the Smith Act at that point, being a member of the Communist Party, you know, they had jailed the National Board. They were functioning as an illegal organization, so it was very hush-hush. But they all gathered in Times Square, and it was just, you know, people in suits, men in suits, women in fancy dresses. And then all of a sudden somebody said, go. And they unfurled a big banner that said, U.S. out of Korea. And they started chanting. And then the police came down on them, she told me. And then everybody just ducked. And people got beaten up. And people got injured. And then what did they do? Is they reconvened further down Broadway. So then they went to Madison Square, you know, down on 34th Street. Again, they're in their suits and ties, till finally somebody says the code word. They pulled out the banner. Police came down on them, clubbed them, beat them up. They went to Union Square. They did it all the way down Broadway. That's what I was told by this woman, this older woman who was kind of training me politically about the opposition. And also, you know, it's interesting, during the Korean War, you know, the USA, that was the height of McCarthyism in the USA. So to have any sympathy with North Korea or Mao or the Soviet Union was, you know, you could go to prison for that kind of thing. But there was opposition. And the other thing is, if you read, there's a novel, or not a novel, but a memoir by a famous writer. The name of him is escaping me now. he was a famous novelist, and he talked about how he rented a hotel room and then set up speakers and blasted anti-war propaganda from his hotel room, anti-war messages. And that was the height of McCarthyism. People talk about that. During McCarthyism, a lot of Americans, leftists, went to prison. They couldn't have jobs. The FBI would follow them to their jobs and arrest them. It was hard times during that time, but they still got a lot done. Let's not forget that the 1948 presidential election, you had the Progressive Party of Henry Wallace, that ran against the Democrats, split the Democratic vote. And that was very much a communist operation. The Communist Party staffed that campaign. Henry Wallace was the editor of New Republic. He wanted peace with the Soviet Union. And the communists, they got their guy on the ballot. He got millions of votes. That was big. I mean, the communists, despite being suppressed, they had a lot of influence during the McCarthy period, and they were dedicated. These were hard-working, dedicated people who really believed in the cause they were fighting for. And prior to McCarthyism, during the Second World War, they'd been very trusted, respected allies of the USA during the Second World War. And in the 1930s, they'd even had people in Congress, Vito Marcantonio. They'd been a very powerful and influential group. And some of them, when it stopped being trendy to be a communist, after World War II was over, there were a lot of people that were out of there. They were just like, oh, it's not cool anymore. Oh, I'm out of here. But, there was a solid core of, roughly 10,000 people who stayed loyal to the cause all through McCarthyism. And what really hurt the U.S. Communist Party ultimately was Khrushchev's secret speech. When Khrushchev got up there at the 20th Party Congress in the Soviet Union and said that all the stuff that they had denied about Stalin, when he got up there and said all that stuff about Stalin that we said was propaganda, yeah, that was all true, that did him in. That was when, the Communist Party of the United States really that was the end of them. I mean, they're still around, they still have an office, but that was what did them in. It wasn't attacks from the U.S. government that really hurt them. It was when they got, attacked from behind, when they got stabbed in the back by Khrushchev. That was ultimately what hurt the U.S. Communist Party more than anything. They had been through McCarthyism. These folks had been to prison. And all along they'd been saying that stuff that, all these allegations about Stalin weren't true. And then when Khrushchev got up and said, oh, yeah, that was all true, that was something that a lot of them just couldn't, that they were done. A lot of them were done at that point. You had the John Gates faction, and, the history of the Communist Party is fascinating. I wish more Americans knew about it, and I wish a lot more young leftists knew about it. If you want to talk about a group that was influential, a lot of young people, they want to study ideas, but if you want to talk about a group that actually had a real amount of influence in U.S. politics, the Communist Party of the USA was a very, very effective and influential organization at one point. And I wish people would study it more and learn from what they actually achieved when they were an effective political organization. What else is going on here? Oh boy, I'm drinking more of that soda. It's a long night. I'm very tired, but I'm also very, very excited about what's going on. Poor old Woody Guthrie. Oh, I love Woody Guthrie music. That's good stuff. The other day, It Takes a Worried Man, and Woody Guthrie was just brilliant. And he had those columns. He was kind of a comedian in addition to being a folk musician. And that was the thing. The Communist Party worked very, very hard to appeal to, middle America, low-income, white working-class folks. And that's who Woody Guthrie was. He was from the working class, and he was playing working class music. And that's so different than the left today. The left today, has this contempt for those kind of folks. Like they're all, a bunch of Klansmen and hillbillies, and they're worthless, and they're racist, and they want to recruit people at NYU who've got their degree and can walk around and talk with their nose out. It's such a different orientation. Back in the 1930s, back when the Communist Party was influential, it was all about class struggle and the working class and the proletariat. That's what it was about. It wasn't about, we're so smart and we've read this book. Did Khrushchev lie? Well, it's interesting. I wasn't there. I'm not a Soviet scholar, but, there's a book by a guy named Grover Furr. A great guy I've had dinner with a few times, out in Jersey, professor at Montclair State University. Dr. Grover Furr says that every claim in that Khrushchev speech is a lie, and he's got written a book to make his argument, and he's gone into the Soviet archives, and he says that I'm not a Soviet scholar, I can't attest to it, but he makes a pretty strong case that Khrushchev was being inaccurate. Read what Grover has to say. I recommend that book. Dr. Grover Furr wrote that book, Khrushchev Lied. It's in English, it's in Russian, widely circulated book. Oh my goodness. I mean, did you think that this could actually happen? I mean, an agreement between I mean, this is huge. This is just huge. This is something that I did not expect. I'll tell you that much. And I really do think this has a lot to do with China. You know, I really do think that China's, you know, alternative economic model and the role that it's playing in the world has a lot to do with this. So let's see what's happening. Oh boy. Oh boy. Crazy times we are living in. Crazy, crazy times. Oh my goodness. Oh man. So tell me folks, Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks. I guess I am changing the subject here a little bit. So the guy who created Starbucks, I'm actually thinking about this because I'm so tired. It's the Starbucks guy, the CEO of Starbucks, the low-wage employer that pays, you know, millennials dirt to serve coffee, to be baristas. He says he might run for president. Howard Schultz. You know what we should know Howard Schultz as? He's the clopening man. The clopening man, right? Now, you may not have heard the term clopening. Well, clopening is, anyone who's ever worked at Starbucks knows what a clopening is, right? So a clopening is a closing and opening. So you close the store. You have a 6-hour shift. It ends. You close the store. And then 3 hours later, not enough time to sleep, barely not even enough time to go home, you open up the store, you have another 6-hour shift. Clopening. The clopening man, the man who did that to his employees. Gave them 12 hours of work in one day with only 3 hours and 4 hours in between. The clopening man wants to be the president of the United States. That's something you should be very, very afraid of. And oh my goodness, the clopening man, the low-wage employer, the guy who brought us, you know, Starbucks, the service sector low-wage employer who drives his millennial employees to, you know, clopening shifts. That guy, what does he say one of his big issues is? He says the national debt is a threat to national security, and he's going to be an austerity president. He's going to cut social programs. That's what he thinks the big issue is. He wants to be president, and he's a Democrat, he says, but he's disturbed by the rise of quote-unquote far left among the Democratic Party. He's mad about, you know, Bernie Sanders and talk about national health care. Howard Schultz wants to be president of the United States. That's something to be very, very afraid of. He's talking a socially liberal game. Yeah, he likes gay marriage, blah, blah, blah. But this is an austerity. This is a low-wage, rip-off employer. Oh, and let me add, Howard Schultz has won awards from the American-Israeli Political Action Committee, right? AIPAC has given awards to Howard Schultz for his pro-Israeli activism. Howard Schultz, my goodness, he wants to be the president of the United States. That is something to be very, very afraid of. He's promising an austerity regime. He's gonna swindle the American people just like he swindled his employees with their clopening shifts, with, you know, computer shifts designed by you know, your schedule changes every week at Starbucks if you work there. They got a computer that designs your schedule. Just a maniacal, greedy, low-wage, capitalist employer. You know, Howard Schultz wants to be the CEO of America. You thought Trump was bad. Oh my goodness. But you know, he talks a socially liberal game, so we're supposed to be okay with it, right? Because, you know, he gave an anti-racist training, right? In Starbucks, your employee, you know, if an African American goes there and is waiting to have a meeting, they get dragged out, right? But he has an anti-racist training, so that makes it okay. And he supports gay marriage, so, you know, he's going to become president and he's going to demolish our national debt by cutting social programs. And he's not going to buy into any of that crazy far left stuff from Bernie Sanders. You should be afraid of Howard Schultz. That is a dangerous, dangerous thing. And let me tell you this, you know, if Trump were to be impeached for what's going on with ICE and how they're dividing families, that would be one thing. If Trump were to be impeached for, you know, for supporting the police state and the police and the brutality against African Americans, that would be one thing. But a lot of the forces that want to get rid of Trump want to get rid of him because of events like what happened tonight. That's what they don't like. They don't like the fact that Trump doesn't seem like he's committed to Wall Street regime change. And if they were to replace Trump with Howard Schultz, do you think Howard Schultz would sign a treaty with North Korea? Do you think he would do that? Do you think Howard Schultz wouldn't have gone into all-out war in Syria right now? This is something to be afraid of. Trump's policies, especially his economic policies, have been, the opposite of what he promised. He said he was going to build infrastructure. That didn't happen. Our infrastructure is still crumbling. He said he was gonna regulate Wall Street more. He was even talking up Glass-Steagall. Well, he did the opposite. Now he's deregulated Wall Street. I'm not a Trump supporter. He may apparently. I'm just joking. I did have an interaction with him, and he said, "Who's my favorite reporter?" You. I'm sure he doesn't have any idea who I am. I'm just being facetious. But he did apparently say I'm his favorite reporter. That's something I've got, right? Maybe it should be on the back of my next book. Favorite reporter, President of the United States, Trump. But no, I'm being humorous. He didn't have any idea who I was. But he did. I'm not a Trump supporter. I did not vote for Donald Trump. I was a supporter of Jill Stein during the election. But I got to tell you, folks, Howard Schultz, if that's who replaces Donald Trump, if we get Howard Schultz, if we get the Howard Schultz regime, that's something to be very, very afraid of. I don't want to live under the presidency of Howard Schultz. Do you think Trump's bad? Howard Schultz would be far, far worse. I can tell you that much. What's going on here? Crazy times in New York. Tell me about it. Replace Trump with a blonde extraterrestrial. I don't know. I don't know about extraterrestrials. I don't know if such a thing exists. People are saying this man will be the next president. What do you think about the social conservatism of the DPRK? Asks Mr. Paper Shortage. Well, I honestly don't know that much about it, right? From what I understand, they don't have gay marriage in North Korea like they don't in most countries around the world. But I do believe that abortion is readily available in North Korea like it is in most socialist countries around the world. They got women participating in the Olympics and winning gold medals for boxing and sharpshooting. They got pictures of women with guns hanging up everywhere. I don't know if social conservatism is the right. They are Korean. They are traditional. You don't hug in Korean culture. That's just one thing you don't do. They're not into hugging and public displays of affection. They're very formal. Any event. They like. People are wearing suit and ties. It's very well decorated. So that's something. But no, I don't know. I've never heard of North Korea. I don't know if socially conservative is. They're not social liberals. They're not like American social liberals are. They're not talking about like transgender issues, for example. They're not. Pornography is not tolerated. So I guess you could call that social conservatism. But is it social conservatism, or is it just kind of not buying into the Western total social liberalism? I don't know exactly if that's how I would characterize it. Good question, Mr. Paper Shortage. I don't know if China is socialist, says David. Aren't there private landlords in China? Yes, but that is not the difference between capitalism and socialism. Under capitalism, the means of production only function as preliminary transformation into capital. That's what Frederick Engels said. Capitalism is the anarchy of production. It's production according to profit. The banks, factories, and industries operating only to make a profit for those who own them. But China has a centrally planned economy. And, China, the state controls the means of production. And you ask about landlords. It's interesting. President Xi recently came out and he took control of the housing market. He said it was unacceptable that housing prices were rising, and he said houses are for living in, not simply for speculation. That's a big problem all over the world. In New York City, for example, where I'm staying here, the reason that the rent is so damn high, right? That was a candidate famous. Rent is so damn high. The reason the rent is so high in New York City is because there's all kinds of houses all over the city, all kinds of houses, all kinds of apartments. Nobody lives in them. Why? Because it's just like gambling. It's the stock market. Somebody buys it, they wait for the market value to go up, and they flip it. And there's all kinds of apartment buildings in here in New York that nobody lives in. And the price just keeps going up because it's not a seller's market. It's not supply and demand. The housing market, real estate, thanks to Donald Trump, he was the one who started this, right? He was the real estate guy. Thanks to that, we've got a real estate market. It's not about people living in them. It's just about making money for owners, landlords, bankers. It's speculation. It's a speculation market. And as a result, the price of real estate just keeps going up and up and up. And no one can afford to live in these buildings. But who cares? Who cares if anyone could buy it, right? As long as you can flip it and sell sell it for twice what you bought it for and make a profit. Who cares, right? We got empty buildings, homeless people, the price of rent is going up and up and up. That's capitalism. They're not allowing that in China right now. They've had a huge crackdown on real estate speculation. I actually wrote an article about it. President Xi has said we're tired of this real estate speculation. Houses are for living in, not for speculation, not for making profits. They are getting control of that. I wish we had a leader in the USA who was doing that. The mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio said affordable housing. Well, I'll tell you, I live in Brooklyn. I'm in Manhattan right now. When I finally get done reporting on tonight's events, it's going to be an hour going home. And if I wanted to live here in Manhattan, where I'm at, if I wanted to live a few blocks from here, I'd be paying $3,000, maybe even $4,000 in rent every month. That is impossible. Right? That's the affordable housing Mayor Bill de Blasio has gotten us, right? The real estate prices are ridiculous. That's a great example of what capitalism is. Under capitalism, houses aren't built so people can live in them. They're built so landlords and bankers can make money, and the price can go up and up and up, and people aren't buying, but they're making money. It's all about profits, right? Under previous systems, people were homeless because there was not enough housing. In today's capitalist market, people are homeless because there is too much housing. People are homeless because there are too many houses. People are hungry because there is too much food. Capitalism is an irrational system. So good question you raised there. Yes, there are some private landlords in China, but the state controls them, and it makes sure we don't get into a situation like what we have before. Learn the guitar, rent is free, that's real communism. I don't know what you're talking about there, Mr. Lennon or Mrs. Lennon, but hey, good for you. Learning the guitar is great, and free rent, that would be great too. I wish we had a situation where people could just, housing was so abundant that no one had to pay for it. That would be ideal. That's one of the long-term ideals, I'm sure, but we're not there. And every socialist country around the world has had some level of rent. I think generally in a lot of socialist countries, it's like if you live in the same house for like 15 years, eventually it becomes your property. Until then, you have to rent it from the state, or now in the more mixed economies like China and Vietnam, you rent it from a private owner who gets a permission from the state to rent it out. All the land technically belongs to the government, but they have an arrangement that certain people have, they get to develop it, and they can bring in foreign investment to arrange the developing. That's how it works. That's part of the mixed reforms. Right now in China, they're building this model city, Saigon. They're building it. I'm sure I'm butchering that. Anyone who speaks Chinese, I'm sure I butchered that. It's a tonal language. I'm not a Chinese speaker. Not a language I can speak. I've heard people say Saigon, but they're building this model city in the Saigon new area. And they're trying to make it just, the model of what the Chinese Communist Party, socialism with Chinese characteristics would like to build. Very, very exciting what's going on there. And part of that is including, new modern housing units. They've got what they call a future hotel, where you don't check in, there's no clerks, you don't check in. You check in with voice recognition software. You check in, with facial recognition software, no clerks. Very exciting. Very, very exciting. What's the name of your article? It was for China.org. It was about housing markets. Communist Party moves to control the housing markets. It's also on my website, calebmaupin.com. You can check it out. Check it out, David. It's an important issue. Housing is an important issue. Why is it the price of housing keeps going up? Real estate speculation, which Donald Trump, that's his trademark. He was the guy who pioneered it here in this city. He was the real estate speculator. That's how he made all of his money. And that's a big problem that we've got in the Western world right now, and all over the world. Urban centers all over the world, people can't afford to live in them. It's a big, big problem people are facing all over the world. China has got it under control. The Communist Party has moved in there, and they said, we're not going to tolerate it. But in other countries, they can't do that. Why? Because the capitalists have property rights, right? It's this libertarian. Why does the government have the right to tell you what you can rent? I mean, here in New York, we have, rent stabilization and some laws, and they still can't get it under control. So in other parts of the country, it's just outrageous. And people who've lived in neighborhoods for decades suddenly are getting kicked out. It's a mess. It's a big mess. Big, big mess. What's going on here in the world today? Next time you should ask Trump about his infrastructure plans. That's a good thing. If I had another opportunity to talk to Trump, I would ask him what he's going to do about the water systems, the crumbling highways, I would absolutely ask him that, because infrastructure is what we need in the USA. We need infrastructure spending. Obama said he would do it, didn't do it. Trump said he would do it, hasn't done it. And it's crazy. The country is falling apart, and I hope, Donald Trump said he would stop focusing on all these wars around the world, focus on the USA. A lot of Americans wanted to hear that. Didn't exactly happen, but this meeting tonight, that's reassuring. If there's ever been a night I felt good about Donald Trump, it's tonight. There's been a lot of things he's done that just repulse me, that I can't stand, that just disgust me. But this is one thing he's done that I'll give Trump a thumbs up on this. What he's doing with the Koreans right now has the Caleb Maupin seal of approval. I am in favor of this Korea stuff. This is exciting stuff. I can't wait. If Kim Jong-un comes to the White House, Trump says he'll invite him, that's amazing. That's going to be amazing. I can't wait for Kim Jong-un to be hanging out at Pennsylvania Avenue. I hope maybe I'll get a chance to interview him. I would interview Kim Jong-un. I'd ask him the tough questions, let him defend himself, let him tell his side of the story. I hope that would happen. So what else is happening in the world today? I have up engineering. It wasn't worth the time for the money. I don't know what that means. What a crazy night we're having here. Oh boy, I am tired. Oh man, what is going on here? Has that press conference started? Crazy night, crazy, crazy night. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness. Oh boy, life. I swear, somebody ask me something. Somebody ask me something. What a world we got. We're chatting on here. Late at the night, it's 4 in the morning. What about my question? I don't know what your question is. Do you believe in property rights? Not exactly. I mean, that's capitalism. Capitalism is based on property rights, and I do think that people's homes shouldn't be taken from them. People's personal property. Let me put it that way. I believe in personal property rights. Your house, your car, anything you directly use, anything that is something that you use to live your life. I believe in property rights. I don't believe in private property. I don't believe in capitalist property. Institutions that are just used to make money. I think that's there's a room for co-ops and private businesses, sure, but ultimately private property, not personal property, private property is negotiable. What are your thoughts on President Xi Jinping? I have said in other videos, I think President Xi is the cutting edge of Marxism. I mean, he's giving amazing talks about Marxism. I've read, both of his books, Governance of China Volume 1, Governance of China Volume 2. This is a brilliant, brilliant world leader. I am a fan of President Xi. I am a fan of President Xi. I think he's doing great, great work. I'm trying to get my shot here. What else is going on? You should watch some of my videos. I've written a lot about him, and I've urged young people who are interested in Marxism should be reading President Xi. He's a very important leader. China has private property. Well, it's interesting. They allow private businesses, but at the end of the day, you don't have any property rights. The government ultimately determines what goes on in economics. They can seize property at any time. People that own businesses and all of that, they don't really have control over it. They have to do what the Communist Party says. There's a guy living in China, and the way he put it to me, he says, there's not an inch of private property in this country. There is not an inch of private property in this country, was how it was explained, right? If you have, technically, if you have a business in China, if you have some land, you have it because the Communist Party has agreed that it's best for you to have it for the country. But you don't get to say, oh, this is mine. The government can't take it. That doesn't happen. Interesting point. What else is going on here? Was Hitler a socialist? No, he was not. He called himself a national socialist, but he was not. If you look at the way the Nazi economy functioned, there were no real nationalizations. The means of production functioned according to profits. They built the Autobahn highways. They ripped up the Versailles Treaty. But Hitler was not a socialist. The economy was very, very capitalist. And in fact, in the lead up to Hitler taking power, in some of the early years of the Nazi Party, there had been like different factions that said they wanted to nationalize the economy and such. And Hitler very famously said that National Socialism just meant that the economy, that as long as the businesses were working for the good of the country, that was fine. There was never a change in property relations. Krupp Steel, Tyson, none of that stuff ever got nationalized, and the Nazis never wanted to nationalize it, right? It was pure capitalism. It was Bonapartism, though. I mean, they seized the property and of a lot of capitalists who were Jewish. They also privatized, and they got rid of the loans, and they canceled the debt to American and British banks. But no, Hitler was not technically a socialist. What else is going on here? What else is happening? Who's asking me stuff? Do you believe in property rights? 150 cameras in China, restrictions on travel. This man will be president. Did Khrushchev lie? What else is new? What else is going on in the world today, folks? I am still blown away by what we've seen in the last few hours. I mean, my goodness. I mean, you know, a meeting with the Korean leaders. This is pretty big. This is exciting. We are living in very, very, very exciting times. What we're experiencing now, this is big. This is very, very big. But you know, who is going to challenge all of this? Oh, it's a late night. Crazy time, folks. What are my thoughts on class reductionism? Well, okay, so that's a thing that gets thrown out, right? That if you emphasize the class struggle, you're a, quote, class reductionist. You're not emphasizing the oppression of women enough. You're not emphasizing these other issues. The folks who talk about intersectionality emphasize that. I'm not a class reductionist, but the ultimate understanding is that the economic foundations of oppression, right? That the oppression that people face is rooted in the economic system. It's not rooted in the mindset. It's not rooted in different narratives. I'm not a postmodernist. The oppression that people suffer is rooted in the economy and the fact that a certain group controls and owns the means of production and society is structured around them. And I think that's the difference. You know, to be a class reductionist and the other thing is that people who accuse people of class reductionism don't seem to understand the Marxist understanding of class struggle. It's not, you know, you're a worker if you don't own the means of production. To them, class means income level. It's like class discrimination is like somebody who makes, you know, so many $1,000s a year treating somebody badly because they look like they make less than a year. You know, and all these handbooks that, you know, the oppression theory stuff on the campuses, you know, they're always talking about class oppression, class discrimination. And it's about income level. It's like, oh, if someone's clothes aren't as nice as somebody else's, they get discriminated against. That's what they're talking about. They're speaking a totally different language. And postmodernism, anyone who tells you that postmodernism is Marxism doesn't know what they're talking about. Postmodernism is post-Marxism. You know, Marxism is considered an ideology of modernity. Marxism says there is truth in the world. There is objective reality. That's the basis of the materialism part of dialectical materialism. Postmodernism is anti-Marxism, and it was supported by Western academia, by, you know, the CIA with their Congress for Cultural Freedom. It was fomented as a way to try and challenge Marxism and make sure Marxism didn't get a stronger foothold among the intellectuals. So anyone who tries to tell you that postmodernism is Marxism, they don't know what they're talking about. I know that creep Jordan Peterson, who's real popular on YouTube, his videos are popping up everywhere. He tries to say that, and he makes the argument, oh, you know, these postmodernists, they're bad because they're Marxists and Stalin killed. It's like your head wants to explode. I think the only book he's ever read about communism is Solzhenitsyn, and he thinks he's an expert on communism. It's scary stuff. I'm not a fan of Jordan Peterson at all. What recommended authors do you recommend? Let me see. You know, there's a lot of good writers out there that you can read. I'll tell you, since we're talking about Korea, one writer that I've always loved is Anna Louise Strong. She's the journalist. She went to North Korea when the country was being established. She went to the Soviet Union. You know, she went to China. She actually died in China. Wrote these beautiful, beautiful books about the life in the socialist bloc of countries. She was an activist in the United States. She'd been involved with the Wobblies, the Industrial Workers of the World, and the Seattle General Strike of 1919. Anna Louise Strong, beautiful, beautiful writer. I've always liked anything written by William Z. Foster, especially in the final years of William Z. Foster's life. He wrote, you know, his history of the Three Internationals, very, very good book if you want to understand the history of the Marxist movement, history of the Communist Party, outline history of North America. William Z. Foster, very good writer. He I would recommend as well. John Steinbeck, I did like Grapes of Wrath, very good book. I like The Pearl, very, very good book. John Steinbeck's a very good writer. And The Grapes of Wrath, you read it, and that's a book he's trying to communicate why the Great Depression happened and give like a Marxist analysis of the Great Depression. And the way it's written, it's a novel, but one chapter is about the Joad family and the main characters. The next chapter is kind of an essay, a political essay where he's describing the situation in the country. Next chapter is the Joad family and their travels and the protagonist. Next chapter is an essay. One point in The Grapes of Wrath, John Steinbeck actually compares, he says that if you could, he says, if you could recognize that Jefferson, Marx, Lincoln, and Lenin are results, not causes, then you might survive. And he actually, he's comparing Abraham Lincoln and Thomas Jefferson to Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin, and saying that, that they're, these revolutionary leaders were the result of situations that unfolded. They were the result of an economic crisis. They weren't causes. They were results. That's a very powerful section of the book. There's a whole thing in the book about what is a red. A red is anybody who wants more than 10 cents an hour. And the Communist Party comes across very, very good in the novel. The Reds, they're called, the red agitators, who were telling the fruit pickers toward the end of the book, all these people that are picking fruit for a living getting ripped off by these plantation owners. The Reds are the ones always getting chased away by the police because they're demanding justice for the apple pickers and the farm workers. Very good stuff. Grapes of Wrath is a great book, and it was considered to be a Marxist book. I mean, John Steinbeck, at the time he wrote it, he was very sympathetic to the Communist Party. He never joined, but he was distributing the Daily Worker, and his wife was a member of the Communist Party. And yeah, I mean, John Steinbeck, that book, The Grapes of Wrath, there's sections in it where he's blatantly invoking capital by Karl Marx, and he's talking about the economics. There's the famous interaction where there's the farmer and there's the guy with the tractor who's going to run over his house. And he's standing there and he's going to shoot the guy on the tractor. He says, "Don't shoot me. They'll just send another guy." And he's like, "Who do I shoot? Who do I shoot?" And it's like the problem isn't any individual. There's no one he can shoot to solve the problem. It's taking his home. The person he's got to shoot is the system. It's a systemic problem. It's the banks. It's the capitalist system that's destroying this farmer's home. Very powerful stuff. The Grapes of Wrath is a good book. And there's this criticism of the book. People bash it. I mean, people don't get how important it is. I read Grapes of Wrath in high school. It was required reading, so I didn't really get into it because I was kind of a rebel and I didn't like to be told what to read. But then when I was in college, during the aftermath of the financial crisis, I read The Grapes of Wrath, and I always learned better, so I got unabridged audiobooks of The Grapes of Wrath. And while I was cleaning my apartment that I rented while I was in college, I would listen to The Grapes of Wrath, listen to it all the way through. Very, very powerful book. I recommend it. If you want to understand capitalism, how it works, if you want to understand the American people, what they went through in the 1930s, read The Grapes of Wrath. I recommend it. Very good piece of literature, and it's considered just good literature in general. Even if you're not a communist, there's a lot of good books from the 30s. I also, around that time that I read The Grapes of Wrath, I also read Richard Wright's Native Son, which is one of the most powerful African American novels of the U.S. history, and it was written around the same time, 1939, and it's about an African American who's accused of killing a white woman and how the Communist Party defends him. Very powerful book. Richard Wright was a very good writer. I guess in the 50s he became an anti-communist, but at the time he wrote it, he was a card-carrying communist. The hero is a communist lawyer. Very good book. Very good book. What else is going on here? All right. Buddhist Bird World is saying, "Hoo hi." Well, hoo hi to you, Bird Worldist. What else is going? Not Against, Just Alternate. Bound for Glory by Woody Guthrie. We observe a photon, we change its nature. That's what it seems goes against materialism. I don't know what folks are talking about here, but you're having a good time talking about it, so keep talking. Crazy times, crazy world we're living in. What is going on? Crazy night. It's 4:16. Oh boy. Is Venezuela socialist? I heard 70% of the economy is privately owned. Oh, very good question, David. And that is interesting. Now, I've been to Venezuela, and yes, right? A lot of the, there's a little bit of farming in the country, not much, not enough to be food self-sufficient, but those farms are private, a lot of private stores, but here's the kicker. The Venezuelan economy, and not just under Chavez, but before that, I mean, it was practically just drawn onto the map because of oil. The countries, it's like Saudi Arabia, it's like Nigeria, the country was drawn onto the map because of oil. And the oil is nationalized. And you walk through Caracas, all these stores get a subsidy from the government. Right? The government subsidizes them with the oil money. And, all the industries they've got in Venezuela, the cement manufacturing. Yes, maybe it's technically private, but it gets a subsidy from the government. The government subsidizes it with the oil money. The government tells it what to do. So yes, and it's kind of like China. It's, and it's like Iran too, right? Iran, they've got a lot of private businesses there, but the biggest economic entity in the country is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and all the oil, which is the main source of revenue, is by the state, and that oil revenue from the state is what subsidizes the economy. So the economy is not functioning based according to profits. I don't think Venezuela is a capitalist economy at this point, because when the biggest money maker is oil, oil is controlled by the government, and most of the major, almost all the private businesses are really not, they're not functioning according to profits. They're getting a government subsidy in order to function, and that government subsidy, enables the government to kind of direct them and tell them what to do with the government-controlled oil money. That's not capitalism. When the economy is directed by the state, operating according to a central plan, not profits, that's not capitalism. It's not about private versus public. People think that socialism is about government ownership. Singapore, huge amount of government ownership there. Huge amount of government ownership. That's capitalism. It's capitalism because the government is just a middleman. It's facilitating the rule of 4 elite families that rule Singapore. There are 4 families that run Singapore. The government's just kind of a middleman. Saudi Arabia, huge amount of state ownership. Almost the entire economy is run by the state in Saudi Arabia, but it's basically the private property of the royal family. It's used to make profits for the royal family. You got homeless people on the street. You got the boom-bust cycle of the market. It's all happening there. The government's involved, but it's just a middleman. But, China, Venezuela, Vietnam, and these countries, you have a private market, but you have a communist party. And you have a mobilized population that's tightly organized, controlling the market and forcing the market to serve public good. That's what socialism is. That's the difference. It's not a question of state ownership. Not a question of state ownership at all. The Soviet Union, under the Stalin, starting with, Stalin's 5-year plans up until the fall, they had 91% state ownership. But during the new economic policy, they didn't, that 100% state ownership is not the only form of socialism. Socialism is about, does the economy function in order to serve profits, or is the economy being controlled in order to make life better for the population? If the economy is being controlled and being, controlled in order to work in the interests of society, that's socialism. If the economy is functioning according to profits and people are making money and doing whatever they want and they've got economic freedom and they're making their profits and who cares about society, that's capitalism. That's the difference. Is the economy being forced to serve public good, or is it operating according to profits? That's the difference between capitalism and socialism. Did Castro write a book? He wrote many books, my friends. Read the Motorcycle Diaries. That's by Che Guevara, not Fidel Castro. Yeah, Fidel Castro, there's a book he wrote, like an autobiography, My Life. There's a lot of compilations of his speeches and articles. There's volumes and volumes and volumes of writing by Fidel Castro. I've read some of it, haven't read all of it. Very, very interesting stuff. Now, Bird World just says Venezuela is socialist. Well, it's interesting. It's led by a socialist party. I would say it's a socialist economy. The Venezuelans, they say that they're on the road toward 21st century socialism. They say they're not fully there yet. That's the terminology that they use. A lot of Venezuelans will say, well, to be socialist, we need to have more industries. At this point, it's just an oil economy. They say we need a steel industry. We need more of our own manufacturing. But ultimately, my understanding of socialism is when the economy serves public good, not profits, when you have a planned economy. Venezuela has a planned economy, very, very clearly. They've got a planned state-run economy, so I would say that's socialism. Is Norway socialist? No, it's not, because the economy in Norway, despite the fact there's a huge welfare state, the economy largely functions in order to serve profits. Yes, there's a high rate of taxation. Yes, there's free health care, but is it socialism? No, it's a capitalist welfare state. It's social democracy, because the economy functions to make profits for owners. You got Wall Street corporations functioning there, making super profits. I'm not against a welfare state. I think people should have, a good standard of living, healthcare, education provided to them. I'm not against that, but socialism is a planned economy. Big difference. Big difference here. Nicaragua, yeah. Nicaragua has had a very prosperous economy, but right now, there's all this unrest there. I mean, essentially, the forces that don't like the government are being encouraged by the United States to rise up and tear things apart. A lot of rioting going on. I hope they're able to bring peace. A lot of young people are frustrated, but their economy has been very, very good. The World Happiness Index said they had the highest happiness of any country in 2016. They've had a lot of really, really big achievements. The standard of living is rising, poverty has dropped. I mean, the government there is very, very popular. Now, this anti-government minority is out in the streets tearing things up. Drug cartels are out there shooting people. But the government of Nicaragua, Daniel Ortega, they've done a lot to raise the life expectancy there. They're making people happier there. They're doing good work. So, you know, unfortunately, the spat of violence there is no good, and I'm sure a lot of people really want that to change. But overall, Nicaragua, you know, the Sandinista government has done a lot to make people's lives better. All right, folks, I'm gonna wind this down here because it's late and I've still got work to do by the end of the night. How might the war in Syria look now if Clinton were elected? I have no idea. I mean, I actually think that Clinton would be far more excited about the war in Syria than Trump is. But how do I know? Who really knows? At the end of the day, you don't really know. But you know, Trump seemed critical during the election. At least talked like he was critical of U.S. regime change operations. Hillary Clinton obviously did not. So there are differences there. But let me continue. What's going on here? Any more questions for me? Let's just keep talking. What's going on in the world today? Oh boy, you know, crazy times we've got here. I do not want a Howard Schultz presidency. I'll tell you that much. I do not want to live under Howard Schultz, the austerity regime. Oh my God, Howard Schultz is something else. He is something else. What else is going on in the world today? My goodness. Now Syria, you know, that's a situation there. The Syrian government, you know, is fighting for its life. It's fighting for its life against an all-out attack. So many of these countries that are just trying to raise themselves up out of poverty. They just don't want to be destroyed. You know, and they're facing just an all-out attack from imperialism and Western capitalism. You know, and you know, North Korea, I mean, they have held out. I mean, think of all the Koreans who have given their lives, have spent their whole lives waiting for a moment like this where their country is basically being recognized. This is big. This is really, really big. Don't underestimate what's happening here tonight. This is a big, big deal. This is big. This is very, very big. All right, folks. It's late. It's 4:30 in the morning almost. I'm going to have to do some more work. I'm going to be here. This is an all-nighter I'm pulling because of this historic meeting that's taking place. But you and I, before I go, let me talk to you. You. Yes, you. You who's watching this. We are doing something special here. We are doing something very, very special here. People don't talk the way we talk. We understand world politics. If you're part of these interactions, you have a unique understanding of politics in the world. And more people need to be watching these lives. More people need to be interacting with the ideas that we've got here, right? I can't do it all alone. I'm just one guy. I'm one guy with a lot of energy trying to change the world, you know, and I need you. I need you tweeting out these lives. I need you reporting on these things. I need you making videos, making the points that I'm making here. Or arguing with me. Maybe you don't agree with me. Interact. I mean, we need to spread this conversation. We're talking about actual socialism. You know, not socialism in terms of everyone gets free health care, but socialism in terms of transforming society, controlling the economy to make a good life for the people, raise the standard of living. We're talking against these wars and against imperialism, about bringing peace to the world. We're talking about the One Belt, One Road initiative. We're talking about science and technology. We're talking about literature and human creativity. We're talking about, you know, getting past this crazy romanticism and actually moving into, you know, building a better world. This is exciting times we're having here. This is unique. These interactions are very, very unique. And I need you, yes, you, I need you to be part of spreading this conversation. You know, we can't do this alone. We need to start spreading this conversation. And you know, a lot of people like to criticize me. A lot of people like to criticize me. If you don't like what I'm doing here, outdo me. Outdo me. Do better videos than I do. Do better YouTube lives. Write better articles than I do. Do it better than me. That's my challenge to you. Don't just sit there and go, well, I can't do a good job, but Caleb, he does it and he sucks. He's not good. That's immaturity. You know that. And that's what most of these left book losers that are bashing me, that's what they're about, right? They can't do this. They can't make videos themselves. They can't write articles themselves. They sit alone on their laptops and they tantrum, oh my gosh, you know, well, Caleb, well, sure, maybe he's doing what I can't do, but he sucks. You know, I mean, that's, come on, you know. It's really childish, you know what I'm saying? If you don't like what I'm doing here, if you have legit criticisms of what I'm saying, go out and do a better job. I dare you. Do it. Do it. And I'll be happy. If you do a better job than I'm doing, I'll be happy for you, and I'll tweet out your videos, and I'll like them. Do a better job than I'm doing here. That's what I challenge you to do, you know? Be mature about it. You know, if you want to do something right, do it yourself, right? I'm doing the best I can. I see what's happening in the world today with Wall Street leading us closer to World War III, with danger, with death and destruction, with so much confusion, with a left that's completely ineffective and irrelevant and being manipulated, with a right wing that's hateful and bigoted and wants an all-out police state. I'm worried about the country I live in. I love my fellow Americans. I love my fellow Americans. If you're an American, my fellow American, I love you. I love the whole human race, but I love my fellow Americans. I am worried about the future of our country, and I am morally outraged by the role that Wall Street imperialism has played in the world. I want to change the world. I want a better world for my fellow human beings, and I want a better life for my fellow Americans. We're facing some tough times right now, and I want to change it, and I have my views. I'm trying to spread truth in the world of lies, but I need you. And if you don't like what I'm doing, do it yourself, right? It's not like I'm the one. It's not like I've been appointed. You know, it's not like someone's put a crown on me and said, Caleb will do it, everyone else must be silent. That's not how it works. You do it. I challenge you. I dare you to do it. I dare you to do it, especially if you're one of those people who doesn't like me. If you're one of those people who, you know, is tweeting out that I'm no good or whatever, do a better job than me. That'll stick it to me. Right? If you wanna show me that if you wanna really show me up, do a better job than me. Do a better job than me. That'll really stick it to me. That'll really hurt. You know, I've heard it all. People are saying all kinds of stuff on the internet about me that has no factual basis. Someone was saying on the internet the other day that I support Pinochet. I support Pinochet. Really. I mean, it's like this could be a comedy routine, you know. Caleb supports Pinochet. Caleb supports Genghis Khan. I mean, come on. Seriously, folks. But anyway, people say all kinds of stuff. Doesn't faze me. I move on, you know, trust me. I've heard far, far worse from people that actually matter to me, so, you know, I'm not really concerned about some kid in the middle of somewhere who says, you know, Caleb has a haircut. I think that means he's a Nazi, the way he does his hair. You know, I'm not concerned about it. You know, that doesn't bother me. You want to stick it to me, do a better job than I am. Show the world that I'm not the best out there, right? Show the world that it's possible to do a better job. Outdo me. I'll probably be happy about it, that someone's spreading the truth better than I can, but if you want to show the world that I'm no good, outdo me. That's my challenge to all of you. If you want to do it better, if you think I'm no good, do a better job than me. I dare you. I dare you to do a better job than me. What's going on here? Oh boy, Chris Dorsey, militant groups. I don't even know who Chris Dorsey is. You'll have to tell me all about it. Global South will rise again. That's funny. Playing off the Southern, you know, the Confederate South will rise again. It's happening. The Belt and Road is doing it. Zimbabwe is about to have their own steel manufacturing, right? What China's doing with the Belt and Road, yes, what people refer to as the Global South is rising. China is rising. Russia is rising. I saw it. I was just in Moscow, and I saw with my own eyes what's happening with the Eurasian Economic Union, how they're building railway and you know, and just lighting up the countryside in the Far East, you know, building farming colonies out there. I mean, this is a renaissance. This is a golden era in Eurasia, and it's spreading into Africa, and it's spreading into South America. This is really exciting stuff. This is really exciting stuff. The world is changing. This monopolistic stagnation the planet's been stuck in, where Wall Street and London keep the world poor. Yeah, not going to happen. The world is changing. All right, folks, I've got to go. I wish you the best. Stay strong. It's a beautiful world we're living in. This is a little revolution here, but you got to get other people involved. Tweet this out. Get people involved in these lives and these conversations and these videos. Make your own videos. Tweet stuff out. Be part of the conversation. This is a little revolution happening via computer, airwaves, internet, social media.